There we are.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World. I had to think about what we're doing because we've been doing all these recordings.
What's today?
What is this? Day one of.
Right.
So, good morning, Michael, and good morning, Yasmin, and everybody else. And so we start this month. We have our 28 Days of Forgiveness program. If you're not already signed up, you can go ahead and sign up still. Hurry up and do it because it's one day, one a day. So you want to get in there.
Right. While you can.
But this is like a big topic. And it's almost like we're at this point of saying we might need to do another 28 days because we keep on coming up with so many more things.
Right.
And we opened up an entirely new can of worms this past weekend. So
right.
Michael says it's a lot of energy. It is a lot of energy.
It is.
So yeah. So what we started talking about, I had this thing that came up last week. I had a couple of things that came up and it was very perplexing because I'm like, I don't feel like there's anything here like for me and what was reflecting back to me with interactions with some people. Good morning, Nicole. And so I'm like, and so like, of course, forgiveness is an apology and all that's on top of our list right now, since we are recording all of the modules and everything, the days. And we're like, so what is it? What is it? I'm like, this one particular thing I had gone, good morning, Gloria. I had gone and just done so much work on, resolving and blah, blah, blah over like the last couple of years. So Sarah's like, well, maybe it's the other way. It's like, oh yeah, maybe it's the opposite world thing. Cause we talk about the opposite world, right? We talk about opposite stuff. And then that just opened an entirely new world to us. Cause I was like, well, what if there was some forgiveness? I said, it sounds really weird. It sounds really illogical to the mind, right? When you say, what if there's forgiveness and apology to be done for things like competence and intelligence and
being a good girl.
Oh, be a good girl. being powerful.
Right.
For being empowered, for being responsible and efficient and all that kind of stuff. And like when you first say that, you laugh, right?
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, and then I had an entire list of stuff to start downloading, and I was like, God, I think we need another month.
I know. Well, and then I started looking closer at that this weekend because I would say, like, do you want this or this for dinner? And it's like, oh, this is good. And it's like, okay, is that a judgment or is that an observation? And where does it come from? And it just really I started that process of looking at everything I was judging and saying, okay, now why is that a judgment versus just an observation? Like if you say something's shiny,
right?
Is that a judgment? Or is it an observation? Because to somebody else, they could go, that is not shiny.
Right. Well, it's like, is this ecru or eggshell? Right.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, it's cream.
It's off-white. Right.
Right. Or not white.
Right. Yeah. And this it seems to be lighter, but it's almost like the flip side of the coin. So if we're going to hit on all of this one side, it's just as important in resolution of duality to hit the other side, right? Because here's the thing. As soon as we create that judgment of good,
right,
then there is a judgment of bad. So as soon as we create anything that's considered positive or good
or desirable,
they create an opposite in doing that. So, but those are things, Gloria says, but those are all things we put work into to accomplish. Yeah, but it's still judgment.
Right.
Well, and the accomplishment, the idea of accomplishment is that I don't already have it, which we do
Right.
because we're already divine and perfect and complete and infinite. So we have all
Right.
the sides to us, right?
And it keeps you in that separation.
Right. Because as soon as you say, I'm not incompetent, I'm not inefficient, right?
That,
Then you are
that means
excluding
right.
something, right? So then I did this massive 2 days of like, all right, fine, I'm just gonna go through all of that, and since we talk about the circle, and we talk about this in the 28 days of forgiveness program, we talk about the circle of forgiveness, which is
Right.
apology as well as forgiveness, acceptance, love and gratitude, right? It's a full circle thing.
Right.
um it's like we have both sides to us, right? So there's nothing that we have that we feel that we're so fabulous about that we never have the other side of it, right?
Right.
Like, oh, I'm great at doing this, because then when you say I'm great at doing this but I'm not great at doing this, right? Like, so people say that all the time. So it's like the same thing. It's important to have the two sides of the apology and forgiveness. It's almost like you have to apologize and forgive yourself for apologizing and forgiving. It's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But I went through that whole thing, and it was like, and wouldn't it be funny that an hour later, an hour after I did that big, huge monster clearing with all of those things, that whole situation resolved like that. It was done.
Right.
It was
Yep.
done. And I was like, oh my God, this is why I laugh, because this stuff is so freaking powerful and so freaking easy when we hit the buttons.
I know. I know.
And it's like, oh, look at that. That all straightened out my reality. It's all done now. Check.
Right. Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And all the clearings and stuff that I've done over the past year and a half going, and it's like, oh, well, look, that was easy.
Well, and looking for what's left.
Mm-hmm. The crumbs. Right.
Right. Right.
Right. And so it's funny because, like, and think about it. Sometimes, so Nicole says, can you ask yourself, how is this good for me? What lesson am I learning? What am I to do? Right. Yeah. Well, always. I mean, that's what I always do.
Right.
I always do. And then it's like, well, when I'm getting nothing, I'm like, because I've already done all this, right? And it's like, well, I'm like, I don't see this in me. Da, 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 da. But then the thing is, when you apologize for considering yourself whatever, right? And forgive yourself for considering yourself intelligent or competent or beautiful or divine or all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Actually, I would take divine out of that, because I think divine is all across the board myself. I keep that
I
as-
think it depends on how you define it.
yeah, that's
Because
true.
if you believe there's a not divine,
That's right. Right. That's what I was saying. Is like, because I believe everything's divine, so therefore there's
right,
no opposite.
right,
So I'm just gonna take that out of my list anyway. But it's like, think about how many times, and this is what you and I got to talking about, how many times someone's had a conversation. It doesn't have to be you. It could be about you, or it could have been about somebody else. Well, she or he doesn't need that because, they, they're so wealthy, or they're so,
right,
they don't have to worry about that because, they're married. They don't have to worry about that because they already have a partner. They don't have to worry about that
right,
because blah, blah, blah.
right.
And it's almost like you take the positive and you make it into a negative by that judgment. Right.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
And we don't really realize we do that. And I have spent a lot of time over years working with people working with others to see that when
Well,
we,
and if you're so focused on what it is about you that is so special and so extraordinary or separates you from everybody else, then that represents that you don't believe it's there anyway.
right.
And that in judging the others, that reinforces that it's there for you,
Right.
which
Well,
is exactly
or the opposite. Or in judging that for others, you're implying that you don't have, that it's not there for you, right?
or for instance, judging someone else's behavior, like reckless behavior or whatever, that means that you judge that, so you go to the other extreme for yourself because
Right.
you can't bear to see yourself doing that.
Right. Right. So Michael says, is it practical to get that granular with this work? If you're guided, that's all I ever have to say about that.
Right.
If you're
Right.
guided. So here's the thing. You can just cover forgiveness, but we have so many things that we believe are, well, we have so many judgments that we still hold, right?
Right.
Um,
Right. And I think that that's the key, is if you're discovering that there's judgment that meets some kind of resistance within yourself, then yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
that works. Yeah.
And so when we get into and I think initially, yes, because we're not in the practice of looking at that, right? And if there are crumbs, like, so, because we've been clearing out a bunch of like huge things, we've been shifting tremendously, and we have a lot of crumbs that are sort of left in the corners. It's like moving out of an old house, right? It's like, it's like,
Yeah, my daughter left some big crumbs behind when she moved out.
right. Well, see, you had that represented in your reality, didn't you, in the last
Right.
week? Stains on the carpet.
Oh, those are the easy ones.
So, we're cleaning all that up to complete all, to
Right.
ensure our completion. And if at some level our mind thinks that they're unfinished, it's going to carry forward with us, right?
Right.
So it's, again, most of the stuff that we do with words is rehabituating ourselves to shift our focus and our energy to doing something differently. So here's the thing, you don't have to do anything, right?
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
it's a matter of where you are in terms of your beliefs and allowance within yourself on how to clear and how to shift so that you don't carry something forward. The thing is,
Right.
we're not in the habit of getting such a complete job done, right?
Right.
Because we're like, oh no, because we've had all these things that what we have done for so long is glorified. It's a great question, by the way, Michael. Totally a great question, because we talk about this stuff all the time.
Right.
What we have, oh my gosh, I just totally lost my train of thought.
What we've glorified.
Oh yeah. We have glorified identity for such a long time, right?
Right.
And
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that. It has to do with, that's the ego's job. That's been the ego's job, is to explore and, identity and separation and exclusion, right?
Mhm.
And we've gotten to such a point, though, in this kind of embodiment, right? This part of our consciousness when we embody here, to such a point of exclusion listen to the words, that we exalt identity and individuality, which, okay, that's what it is. But the thing is that when we do that, the ego is very remiss. It does not want to let go of certain things. It does not
Right.
want to let go of certain crumbs, because it says this creates my identity, right? So, Gloria asks, is it necessary to forgive yourself, let's say, for being intelligent instead of just accepting with gratitude? Well, except that when we judge others, it's still this judgment thing of resolution. And I didn't think so
Or
either.
would you love yourself any less if you thought you weren't as intelligent as you believe you are?
Right. And that's an ego thing.
Right. Right. And the fact that you have to, not have to, but the fact that you expend energy in referencing your intelligent means that there's less acceptance in overall of you, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because I had the conversation with somebody just this past week who totally um totally exalts their intelligence over everything else in their, of their capabilities. And I'm just like, so what if you had more? Because they were afraid of losing that intelligence,
Right.
because that's what they put their identity on. And I said,
Right.
what if you let go? What if you let go of using the mind and allow, I said, because here's the thing, you're saying that it's got to be the mind or consciousness. It can't be both. Like, and
Right.
that's an exclusion thing, which is ego.
Well, and the more the more you focus on, like, for instance, in sticking with the intelligence example, the more you have the potential to become fearful of losing it.
Yes.
and then the more you attract that and the more imbalance you get. And I had that conversation with somebody this past week about, you know, rather than going to that place of fear of losing that ability and losing so much dimension these days, instead of staying in fear of that, say I'm out of balance and I need to regain that balance in my life and see myself for the wholeness that I am, whether it's all my mind or all this or all this. It's everything.
Mm-hmm. So it is, and when we, so here's the thing, and is there a better term for it? Nah, there's probably not a better term for it, but the thing is, it's sort of a catch-all when we go into the apology, forgiveness,
Right.
embrace, acceptance, because we
Right.
cover the entire gamut: apology, forgiveness, acceptance, love, and gratitude, right? So you have gratitude in there, and you want to cover every little bit. Sometimes, I didn't say it at
Right.
all to use to judge others. The thing is, but we don't realize we do that. We do that all the time. Like, how do you, oh, well, that person, she's really intelligent.
Yep.
But the thing was, it was funny that the discussion with that person was like, well, and I said, well, what if you succumb to the consciousness, because, and then allow it? And I said, what if that allows your intelligence to expand even more? Because essentially, when you let them to integrate, it does,
Right.
because we
Right.
already
Right.
know everything. We already have all of the answers. We have access to all of it. It's a matter of what we've
And
remembered.
everyone does.
Everyone does. So we're all intelligent. We're all
Right.
this, we're all that. We're all unintelligent because we've forgotten. We've all, it's all of these, things. So it's like when we start to
Right.
just accepting who you are,
Yeah.
no matter what your gifts are. Exactly.
That's
That's the
the
whole thing.
point.
And yes, we have gifts. We have things that we embody here. That is part of the egoic identity, and that's okay, right?
Right.
And the thing is not to attach ourselves to them, right? Which is what we do. And when we sort of do that whole, like, it's just a way for us to let go of the attachment, right?
Right.
So right now
Exactly.
we're going through this forgiveness thing or whatever, right? And
Right.
this, but like I said, it's the circle of apology, forgiveness, acceptance, love, and gratitude, right? That's covering the whole gamut of negative emotion to positive emotion,
Right.
basically just whole emotion, right? Because we want to go
Right.
back to a circle
Exactly.
of completion
Right.
instead of one or the other, right? That in itself is a duality.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's coming to the singularity of that.
Yes. Yes. And that's really the point right now. I think, we talked about that, whatever it was, a month ago or something like that, the singularity thing.
Yeah.
And
Maybe 3 weeks ago.
a year
I could look
ago,
it up.
what's the difference? I don't know.
I know.
So the singularity thing is that understanding of wholeness and understanding that we have all of it, right? So when we judge somebody else as unintelligent,
Right.
we need to remember that we're unintelligent in some ways because we don't remember certain things, and that's whatever. But we all have the capability. We all have the, it's so funny how, like, we talk about people, right? Oh, well, they're not that smart upstairs, but they have a great knack for this, right? That's
Right.
judgment. Those are judgments just built right into there, right?
Right. Right. Well, and that typical, oh, but she has a great personality.
Right.
Or he has a great personality.
Right. Right.
We talked about singularity on the 4th, so it's right at a month.
Okay. Okay. The beginning of the year, right out of the gate. So, and the thing, so it's just, so go back to Michael's question, it is a matter of more than getting into the granular, the idea of getting into granularity is actually getting into the habit
Right.
of knowing that any adjective we use is a judgment of some sort.
Right. And then looking at the energy behind that and the
And
basis of that.
Right. And so when we start to do that, then it's just like I said, once I open the door to allow that,
Right.
right, then it just like poured in, and I was like, okay, yeah, all of that and whatever else, because
Right.
there's
And
just
anything else that wants to drag along.
yeah, and it felt so free, like
Right.
freeing more so than all the heavier stuff that we have been working on, what we consider the heavier stuff, but it's not, it's it's interesting because we can use anything in a positive or negative way.
Right.
So if you're guided, then you're guided. And that was the whole thing. It's like, okay, so maybe, and that's the thing was in this particular case, what opened up that door was I have been working on this one thing that kept on pinging me and like being a brick wall for the past year and a half.
Right.
I think longer than that. And I was just like, why has this still come back again? And I
Right.
thought I was completely done with it. And so like my whole thing is, and it's the same situation, same individuals, blah blah blah. And then I was like, oh, and so like here's my new thing is, okay, in opposite world, what would I
Yeah.
do? Right.
Right.
Because really, and that goes back to this opposite world thing. The opposite world is when we look in the mirror, what we see reflecting back to us is opposite of what we think we see.
Right.
Reflection is the opposite,
Right.
right? Mirror twins.
Right.
Mirror twins are the ones that have like the organs on like on matching,
Flip. Right.
like flip. One has one flipped, and they literally are mirrors of each other. So if you think about that, that changes our perspective, and that actually starts to put the light on a lot of crumbs of things that we are not in the habit of looking at.
Right. Right.
So powerful. It's very extra. It's very powerful. And I will say, like I said, once I did that, it was like, oh my God, I just feel like I lost like 5,000 pounds right there. It's
Right.
like,
Right. But
yeah.
I will say that it took us looking at all the other judgments to be able to get to that place.
Well, because we were already in that mode, right? We're already in that habit.
Exactly.
We got into the habit because we've been focusing on that right now,
Right.
getting that program together, doing the recordings, talking about, the topics and da da da. Yeah. So it was, and it has been coming up the last several weeks. Cause I mean, last week we talked about, what did we talk about last week?
Oh, wow.
It was related.
What we value, cycling back around, um, looking at things a different way. Hologram and backwards world, mirror,
Yeah.
opposite world.
Right. The backwards stuff. Yeah. And so that's really the bigger topic right now is the backwards world, right? The backwards, how everything's a mirror. And if we think it's one thing, then what if we recognized it to be the opposite?
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
So
So I think that that's the good point is that, holding yourself and looking at yourself, and feeling the need to focus on, I'm an intelligent person, I'm a good person, and that is setting up that judgment because you're valuing yourself based on a judgment.
mhm. Yeah.
Or devaluing someone else based on a judgment.
Right. 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 I mean, and we do it all the time. We don't even realize we're doing it.
Right. Well, and it's everywhere around you.
Mm.
All the media, I don't even want to bring up the government. We don't need to bring that in. That's just too messy.
You already did that recording.
I know, yeah, that's just too messy. But I mean, it's so reflective in how we raise our children.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so smart, and oh, you're such a good girl. And I mean, I even talk to my pets that way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're so pretty, and you're such a good boy, and you're all these things, and it's like you're just good because you're just lovable. You're just perfect as you are.
Yep. 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 And so we drown ourselves in the adjectives.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that that reflects, like, Gloria alluded to that, is that's what gives us the motivation to do things instead of just being. That brings us back to the whole just, doing versus being.
Yep. Yep. And it's going back to the place of, I don't know, we talked about this like a year ago sometime, which was the some other time that's not now. That was doing from being, doing from a place of being instead of doing to be something, right?
Exactly.
Because
It's
doing,
like I need to paint and I need to be a good artist so I can prove my worth to the external world so it'll reflect back to me so I can feel good about myself versus I am divine consciousness. And in that divinity, I'm going to reflect passion, love, joy, beauty onto a canvas for myself. And then everything else beyond that is just a bonus.
and that's, by the way, the most incredibly magical art, right?
Or
Anything.
painting or
Yeah.
cooking
Yeah.
or whatever expression you choose.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and I tell people that all the time, like, okay, so not being a chef, right? Knowing how to cook, but not being a chef, there is a very distinct difference of when I'm in the mood to cook something and I'm putting a lot of love into it because it's, for whatever reason in that moment, no matter what I make, the food tastes incredible when I'm in that kind of mood. Versus
Absolutely.
I just have to,
Absolutely.
versus I just have to fill a hole. And guess what? The
Right.
food tastes like you're
It's
just
an obligation. Right.
Yep.
Yep. Exactly.
So it's all the energy we put behind it. And when I'm doing it because I want to do it, not because I have to do it, right? When I'm doing it from that place of being,
Right.
or I feel it, not to get, again, not to get the outside approval, but to express because it's coming in and effusing out
Exactly.
versus it, expending to get back, right? Which is, it feels like so much more energy when you're just effusive.
Exactly. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, yeah, is the more of those adjectives we take away, right? Because really that's all it is. The descriptors, which, I mean, they are judgments in some way, right? Because like we
Right.
said, like
Well,
show
and they
somebody a shade of blue and you'll like show 10 different people and they'll give you 10 different like color, titles of what that is.
well, and that just perpetuates the separation.
Right. And it's not that it's bad, it's to just be aware of,
Well,
right?
exactly. Exactly.
And to do it with acceptance, and to see it for what it is and not really hold it to the energy of exclusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um that's it. Because here's the thing, people can look at, say, we're not looking at colors, the color wheel, and say, oh, well, this color is opposite that on the color wheel. I don't even remember them anymore. I used to be really astute at that. But it's like, this color is opposite of that. And it's like, but it's all part of the same wheel. It's all part of the same rainbow.
Right.
And
Right.
actually, at the end of the day, you know, what we consider light or white is all of it all together.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And so then we start to refract it into colors. So colors are just refractions of the rainbow, of the whole prism of light. And so like, yeah, yeah. And just think about it. It's interesting because, one of the things you learn, and I know because you've been certified in scuba diving as well, but when you take classes and when you get certified to scuba dive and you do the classroom part and they talk about how the colors filter out
Right. As you get deeper you go.
as you get deeper in the water at different like atmospheres. So but that's it's still whole. It's still the whole thing.
Right. Exactly.
So that's really the important part of all of this. And so do we have to think of every part of it? No. But we're sort of like, what I did with that exercise was call myself out, right?
Exactly.
On the precious things, the precious
Right.
things that I had in the closet
Right.
that I say, I don't have to look at that. Those are good judgments. Those are good.
Right. These don't count.
Right. These don't count. I have nothing to apologize for there. I have nothing
Right.
to forgive myself for there. So, you know, sometimes, and it's funny because we could have that discussion all day, because sometimes when we identify ourselves with something like that, right? When we identify ourselves, just so to say, okay, say when an individual identifies themselves as brilliant,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes a part of their identity. Well, then their ego will do everything it can do to continue proving its brilliance,
The brilliance.
right?
Right.
And it will do, which is nothing wrong with that. It will do everything it can to avoid doing anything that would show it to not be brilliant.
Yeah, to detract from that.
Right. Right. So, and then that's where ugly judgments come in, because then it's like, well, then you cover it up with things like, oh, well, I'm not going to engage in that. That's just beneath my intelligence, or, things like,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and we make ourselves feel better with that. But it's actually an internal judging thing going on. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole, and sometimes, yeah. And there are so many things that we hold ourselves in high regard about, that
Right.
we will avoid other things that we believe will show us in another light of that.
Right. That threatens that belief.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes detrimental and limiting. So yes, that's where it comes back to the apology and forgiveness is important to recognize, because there are many things we have done or not done because we wanted to hold that expectation of that positive judgment of
Right.
ourselves and our minds,
Right.
thereby, limiting our full experience, and maybe might have had even better outcomes on something had we allowed a different path because of what we believed in that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's tricky, tricky stuff.
It is. But bringing it back to what you said, that the bottom line is the awareness.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think the more you practice forgiveness, the more you come to a place of being aware of every nuance, like we're talking about.
Right. Right. So, and we're so blind to this. This is something and it's very uncomfortable for us to look at because we have defined ourselves this way.
Absolutely.
I would say others, but really it comes from ourselves anyhow. We judge others
It
from how we
does.
judge ourselves. So,
It does.
so, so the ego is like, oh, what do you mean? I don't say it's bad for me to say I'm intelligent. Don't say it's bad for me, but because if I have to forgive or apologize and that implies that it's bad, it's like, no, nope. There's no bad implication there.
Exactly.
But that was the hardest thing for us to see. That's why I was like, oh my gosh. And then when I finally saw it in all these words and everything just started flowing through, and I went out there, it was one of the best meditation clearings that I have ever done. It was incredibly liberating.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly liberating. So it's interesting, because then that in itself becomes the equalizer, because then once we do that for ourselves, we do it with everybody else.
Exactly. And that acceptance just overflows. Like we talk about, you gotta fill yours before you can overflow to everyone else. And I
Exactly.
tell you, if you can't get to that place of forgiveness with yourself, forget it with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because that's what we do. Then we project it onto others.
Right.
Yeah. And for some reason, this must be important. Well, you got to think about what's going on in the world right now. We've gotten so bipolar. So
Right.
here's the funny thing, and funny how this topic just came up with so much that we're, looking at right now to resolve. And it's, excuse my yawn. I don't want to say the word mend because that implies something needs to be fixed, but to resolve and complete.
Right.
So we don't have to hold it in polarity and separation anymore. Yeah. That feels really good. So, what is our clearing today? I would say that to hold ourselves in that place of seeing all this,
Yep.
seeing,
Awareness.
having the awareness within ourselves of what we, the positive judgments.
Right. Right.
And yeah, well, might as well just, let's just put them all in a big basket and say we'll just do that whole cycle of apology, forgiveness, acceptance, love, and what was the last one? I totally just blanked.
Gratitude.
Gratitude, right? In completion, in that singularity. And in doing that, then we do finally recognize ourselves as in a singularity of wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
because then we can accept all of it as part of us. Right. And not only then do we feel like we're just a facet of the whole multiversal divine gemstone, but then we realize that we are the gemstone and all the facets are within us too. And that's just pretty amazing.
It is. It is.
So all of that in a nice little nutshell. You ready?
Yep.
All right, let's go. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, open your heart, allow yourself to connect in wholeness with this creation. That felt really nice.
I did.
It was funny. I saw something in the beginning. I was like, what is that? And then I just realized what it was at the end because I came back to it. Because I saw like the big eye, like the all-seeing eye, right?
Right.
And I saw it was like looking into like the shallows at the ocean where you have a bunch of algae and stuff. It was
Hmm.
like some fuzzy green algae, and you could still see through it, but you'd see the algae, there. It was like, I'm like, what am I looking at? This is so weird because it was like behind the eye. And then I went out and whatever it was I was seeing at the end, I just started seeing somebody wiping it clean, right? Because it's like, oh, well, that's how we see ourselves. Like we see ourselves, it's another filter, right? So
Through the
it's like,
judgments.
yeah. And then once that was cleared out, it was like, oh, look at how incredibly amazing this is. It was like seeing the whole universe. I was like, oh, look, there's that step. So that was really nice. How about you?
I kept feeling, we always talk about flow and staying in the flow. And it was like it started like a trickle. And it was like, oh, yeah. And then, more and more and more. And then it was just, and then you're like drinking from a fire hose. And then it's like, oh, if I just let go, then it was just like, just that allowing, and it just is then, instead
Yeah.
of like acknowledging the flow, and then it went from that to where, oh, it just is.
Right. Yeah.
That felt really incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. That was like the wiping away, right? Because then all of a sudden the eye was actually gone because then the eye didn't really even exist. And then it was just
Right.
like
But when
everything, it's
right.
like nice. Yeah. All right. Well, another tiny topic for the week.
That's right. That's right.
So, everybody this week, yeah, be just very observant. For those who are watching or listening who are doing the 28 days of forgiveness, that's going to come up a lot, the observance, because a lot of things are
Right.
start just coming up and agitating and maybe triggering, but then it's all to be observed to flush away and recognize it's all part of the whole. So
Right.
great stuff. Great stuff. Great to be out there with you. So we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. This is Angela Coulter, and
Sarah Sieg Evignoni.
see you next week on Ascended World. Bye.
Bye.